Hello, everybody. Let me first start by saying I hope everybody down in southeast Queensland and far north New South Wales stay safe over the next week. It looks like you've got a Jasper coming in. If you're in Queensland, at least you're in the best place in the entire world for dealing with floods and cyclones. Other places in the world should really come and see how Queensland do it. It has nothing to do with which government's in power. It's just after over 100 years of these sorts of things happening, they're very good at it. They're not so good with bushfires, but they're very good with these disasters. So if you're in Brisbane, at least think yourself lucky that you're in Queensland. If you're in New South Wales, remember, chances are you're going to have to rely on yourself. Now, I don't have much to talk about politics today. I'm sick of Ukraine. I'm not sick of it. It's not like, oh, I'm sick of it. I just wish it'd go away. It's not that. I'm sick of all the Trump stuff and Ukraine stuff when all this other stuff's happening around the world that we never hear about. And whenever I tell people about it, they think I'm crazy. So what I thought I'd do is just tell you why I've decided to start making videos. And the main reason for that is at the age of 55 and a lifelong time of being active in environmentalism, going to anti-war campaigns, believing that workers' rights are very important, believing that human rights are very important and fundamental and overriding above everything else. After a lifetime of doing that, I find myself at 55 with no group to say that I belong to. I can't say I belong to anti-war groups because anti-war groups now seem to have acceptable wars, where as a child of the 70s I was brought up that there's no acceptable wars. So when you go to an anti-war, when you see a poster for an anti-war meeting and you drive 2 hours to that anti-war meeting and you find out that that anti-war meeting is actually a pro one side of a war, you can't really join that group if you believe that all wars are bad, and my job as a privileged white person in a place where there's no war is to advocate for no wars and to point out that we shouldn't be going to any wars, we shouldn't be funding any wars, but that's not acceptable in the anti-war movement anymore, so I no longer belong. Same with workers' rights. When it comes to workers' rights, I believe that there's fundamental workers' rights that workers should have. One of those rights is the right to take away labour, and the other one of those rights is the right to side with other workers fighting for their rights. So it's very important to me that if the electrical trades union sees that, say, the people working down at the brewery aren't getting award wages and aren't getting proper workers' rights and that when the people at the brewery go out on strike, that the electrical trades union can go and march in the, not necessarily strike, but go and march in the streets in support of the workers at the brewery. But in Australia, if you did that, you'd end up in jail. And that's acceptable amongst union figures, that's acceptable at Trades Hall, all those things are acceptable. A lot of those things were put in by Labor governments. If you look at New South Wales today, you've got a Labor government fighting with the trade unions, using the courts to basically break strikes. And that's perfectly fine with the ACTU. And if you bring that up in the union circles or in places where people who talk about workers' rights, you get told that you're far right, and I'm anything but far right. But anyway, I'm no longer, my views are no longer acceptable amongst the groups of the places where I form those views. When I moved to the place where I live now, they were having a fight to stop windmills. Those windmills would have destroyed forests where tree kangaroos, koalas, quolls, Australian glider possums, sugar gliders, cassowaries, basically the Daintree forest, but not the Daintree forest, so that nobody knows it's there. But it's right next to World Heritage Forest. We couldn't find green groups who would support us in our fight. We won that fight, by the way, so we must have been right in everything we were saying, because the government in the end decided they didn't want to have the fight. So if I go to environmental groups seem very happy to destroy the environment to follow a green revolution, and anybody who speaks out against that is a pariah. So I no longer belong to the environmental groups that I've belonged to all my life. And the same with human rights. Like, a lot of the closing the gap issues and a lot of the issues of people living in poverty who aren't First Nations are the same issues. But if I go to meetings for either one of those, that want to advocate for either one of those groups, if I say what I think is, which we all should be getting together and fighting for a raise in social security to above the Henderson poverty line, I'll get told that I'm trying to gaslight the issue and I'm trying to overtake the issue by people who make a lot of money from people living in poverty. And it's very hard, and I don't belong in those groups anymore because I'm told I'm far right. No, I'm not far right, and it's highly insulting to be told by somebody like me to be told I'm far right, because I've paid me dues. I've chained myself to dirt trees, super glued myself to earth movement equipment. I've been at anti-war protests on docks in both Brisbane and Victoria to stop American warships docking that may or may not have nuclear weapons on them. I've done lots of things like that during the course of my life. I've lived a strange life. But yeah, I've definitely paid me dues and I'm not far right. But I don't feel like I belong in any left groups anymore. And I feel like I'm not the only person like me. Unfortunately for me, I'm also a complete hermit. So being involved in activism like that is quite a difficult thing to do, because you've got to deal with people, and I don't play with others well. But yeah, and yeah, I really, like, yes, I understand that it's the youth of today's time But the youth of today really seem to have been conned into fighting the neoliberal wants and needs, like the windmill thing, or the solar panel thing. Solar panels are great for your roofs, and are a wonderful product and cut your electricity, and we should be putting as many as we can on roofs in places where they do the job that they say they do. But if you put acres and acres and acres of black square panels right next to each other across the desert of Australia, how come no one ever speaks about what lives underneath those panels and the change to that environment and what that actually means? And a lot of these plans for all these big solar farms and things like that also involve putting it on Indigenous land. But I don't see anyone going to ask the Indigenous people if that's okay with them. We just force it upon them. So if I ask the question, are we not the new colonialists? Are we not the new British people just going onto Aboriginal land and dumping our green revolution on top of First Nations people without a single thought of what that does for First Nations people? But if I say that at an environmental thing, I won't be invited back, and if I've got friends there, I certainly won't be liked, and so I won't have friends after saying a view like that. And it seems to me that people can't accept views anymore. Like, what should happen in a situation like that is that other people there should educate me as to why I'm wrong. And by educate me, I don't mean shout at me, but bring along receipts. Because they can't, I'm just excluded from the group, where what they should be doing is having a thought about what I'm saying and asking themselves whether I'm right. I'm not asking them to accept me, I'm just asking them to ask the question, why would somebody like me say such a thing? And the reason I do is because I'm an environmentalist and I really worry about the spinifex land in the desert, one of the only environments in this country I've never seen. I've never been to the desert. Not the real desert. I've driven through it in a truck. It's a truck driver, like, but it's not like you stop. That's all I've got to say. That's why I make my videos now. It's not so people can watch them. I don't really care if people watch them. All I know is that the things I have to say, nobody wants to hear anymore, but I still want to tell people, and that's why I'm making these videos. Please like and subscribe. Sorry to have a little rant, but like, yeah, an election's coming up, and I find myself asking myself, why is it that nobody in Parliament represents me, and why during the election there's nobody that represents me? The closest that represents me is the Green Party, but that's not for their green policies. The Greens are a perfect example of people who will chop down the forest to put up windmills. Um, the surprising thing is that the Green social policies match my old fashioned 1970s Labor views. So if you're an old fashioned Labor man like me, then vote Green in the election, because what you're basically getting is what the Labor Party used to be if university students ran the Labor Party in 1970. Everybody have a good day. That's all I've got to say. The day's too beautiful and nice, so I'm going out to the forest. to see what gives the forest can give me. Goodbye.